All right, ladies and gentlemen. One of the main topics out there is the witch's mark. There's also the other category, which is known as the devil's mark. And a lot of groups today will not touch upon this because they're afraid of retribution. They're they're afraid of going against the norm and actually discussing what it is and what it entailed, especially from the last 500 years. Now, what we're going to discuss here is the differences between the witch's mark and the devil's mark. No, Bella. Daddy's on the phone. Get down. All right. So, anyways, we're going to discuss the differences, but we're also going to sit here and discuss what they are and describe them in great detail. So, the first thing up is the devil's mark. What is the devil's mark or the mark of the devil? Well, Ribbons describes the mark of the devil as being a personal signature of the power of Satan, okay, of the devil himself. Basically, in the same way as a rancher would brand their cattle, okay? And he's not the only one. Even Rosemary Gully and the Witchcraft and Encyclopedia of Witches and Witchcraft describes this as well. And outside of this, it's only what you could find on Google. But when we talk about the mark of the devil, a lot of this is from the Judo-Christian Society, specifically that of the book of Revelations, chapter 13. And what's ironic about this is the mark of the beast is 666. A lot of people classify it as 666, which is in essence, 6 is the essence of the sins of man, whereas 66 is the seals that can be broken, or it can be classified as the different dimensions of it. I guess you can say the different levels of inquiry within the hidden gnosis of yourself or that of the path that you're on. Not like something out of Supernatural where you get 66 seals that have to be broken to kick off the apocalypse. But there has also been references to that 666 was originally 616 and 999 being in mirror image. Now, what is the number significant to? A lot of people make the mark of the beast being on the palm of the right hand, or in the old days, behind the eyelids, underneath, in the mouth, by the gums, on your lip. Perhaps the number 666 in unison in a circle someplace on your skin, which is why Danu referenced shaving every aspect of the accused back in the 15th century as being to view the mark of the witch or the mark of the beast. Okay, but he also put it as the witch's mark. That basically, how should I say this, marks them as being witches. Okay, if one of these marks was proven to be upon the body and where it was considered was someplace personal, like the groin, the inside of the thigh, perhaps the eyelids or the armpits, okay, which is where these marks were said to be, okay, and if one was found on the accused, then the next step was torture. Okay, they would be tortured. They would be starved to death. They would be put on the rack and made to confess to just about anything that you can think of. And then once done, they were given a chance to recant and go back to God or Jesus, or whatever you want to call it. And if not, then they were burnt at the stake. They were hung until dead, or they were drowned. Personally, if you actually follow history along with mythology, you see where it was just a way to get rid of your enemies. Especially if you get into Nicholas Remy's work, where in his book Demonolatry, an ancient historical account of witchcraft, he talks about the powders and the items that were found on most of the witches, or most of the accused witches. And what's interesting here is most of those who were actually accused were women. And very few of them were actual practitioners of the craft. So by the time the witch's hammer was created in the 16th and 17th century by a minister, no less, a Christian minister, word had gotten around that anything from a birthmark to a wart, perhaps some kind of pimple or mole that was found on an individual, basically confirmed that they were with the devil. They were guilty of association with the devil. And what's interesting about this notion is that they utilized hot pokers. They utilized ice, fire, because these sections, such as a mole or some form of birthmark that was on there, would not be able to feel pain or any form of temperature change. So therefore, because they did not holler out for mercy, they were accused of being a witch and basically sent up the creek, so to speak. Now, if you go into Reginald Scott's discovery of witchcraft, he speaks a lot about marks and what the marks were and what they were affiliated with, levels of sin to demonic lords that were association to the particular accused witch or warlock, the sorcerer. Whereas in Peter Haining's book, warlocks were basically independent, to which in Scottish lore, covens of witches, females, who had books of grimoires, or I should say books of shadows, BOSs, were just copies of the main book of shadows, otherwise known as a black book, which was held onto by a warlock, a male practitioner that controlled just about multiple covens of female witches in the region. Okay, so if you got 32 covens of witches that were controlled in one region or one territory, that was one warlock controlling all of them. And that's the way he saw it. But if we break down the term warlock and we go into, say, for an example, the Book of Witches by Hans Holzer, we see where a warlock is a solitary practitioner who basically is a conjurer of some form of magic. Most of the time, it is due to invocations or evocations, association with demons or angels, to jinn, some form of god or demigod, some form of being that aided that warlock in power, something that he made a deal with. And he was compared to a modern day illusionist with the sleight of hand tricks. Sometimes these beings, these practitioners were considered to be agents of the devil. So that didn't really go in the favor of the witches at that time because it was the lack of knowledge, it was the lack of understanding. It was more fear driven than anything. And instead of trying to understand the difference between devil worship and actual practitioners of, say, paganism, they were all, anything that was not of their church, their god, the church, was eliminated. Just like the previous 500 years through the Dark Ages, the Holy Wars, and the Crusades. These were all preemptive strikes against the burning times of the world, where hundreds, if not thousands, of witches were burned, crucified, and hung or drowned, basically murdered and accused of being devil worshippers. And that's something that is very, very interesting. And we look at the modern day today, especially here in the United States of America, where ignorance is literally bliss. Hello, Dragon. Because if we go down to, say, for example, Tucson, the mark of the beast is considered a thumbprint. In the Northeast, it is photos, the photo. In the Southeast, such as Georgia, you have implants. In the Northwest, you have identification chips that are put into certain regions that connect to not only your bank account, but everything else in your life, including a personalized photo, which is kind of ironic because now you're seeing 4 different methods of what the mark of the beast is. And what's interesting about this is that Christian ministers, specifically apostolics, Pentecostals, and Baptists, have been literally preaching on this for a while now. And if you look closely at what they're obsessed with, you actually see where the world's their influence within the world is literally guiding against the most hostile region of the world, which is Israel. And the funny thing is the world is going along with it because they're aligning themselves with the enemies of Israel, those who actually have the resources that the United States wants, or the first class world orders want to have, such as oil, such as diamonds, money, power. And it's all lining up against Israel. And of course, Israel is putting up walls and everything, which is kind of ironic because if you look at their city, 99% of their entire country, the city of Jerusalem, is made up of fucking walls. Literally. So, I mean, you got all these Hollywood produced films of people going down through certain Jewish or Hebraic Arabic sections. And all of a sudden you hear the horns offerings going off. And then you got you got the sin offerings, and then you have the burnt offerings and everything else in between. So instead of 3 main events, people don't realize that it takes place over a 21-year process. So what is the mark of the beast? What is the mark of a witch, or the witch's mark? Is it classified as a number? Or is it classified as, say, for an example, a mole? Perhaps a birthmark of some kind. In the last 500 years, these 2 terms are no longer separate, but interchangeable to fit the church's will. And what's ironic about this is that nobody's questioning it. Nobody's speaking on it. Most of the occult society is nothing more than reversed Christians, playing the atheistic Satanist game of putting on the bad guy badge, playing the accuser, the literal opposer, taking it quite literally, I might add. As a sister of mine within the satanic community put it, she referred to it as a fad. A fad was started by Telia Curtis and Caitlin White. But personally, if you look at the satanic community, that within the demonic sorceries and that of the arts, it literally predates them. It literally predates both Telia Curtis and Caitlin White. So her viewpoint of saying that it started with them is basically incorrect. I can tell you that when I was studying to become a minister, I found out that there are two ways to do it. One, you can either go to school and spend thousands of dollars to become a minister, or you can learn from a minister personally. Now, I chose the latter because it was cheaper. Okay, and I spent 7 years studying underneath a Christian apostolic minister. Not just an apostolic, but a Baptist minister. I studied underneath a Pentecostal minister. I studied underneath a Southern Baptist minister, and I studied underneath an apostolic minister. 2 apostolic ministers, to be precise. And what was ironic about this is that most of the facts about the devil's mark changes. When you look at any given Christian organization, these perceptions change from day to day. Anton Zandelavey was correct about that when he said in his book, The Devil's Notebook and Satan Speaks, where he witnessed ministers and Christians going out, whoring around, committing sin and adultery, and then going back and crying for forgiveness to their God, and only and making false promises, only to do it again. But while I was studying underneath this apostolic minister, I started going out and getting Bibles from the dollar store, and I just hand them out for free, all over the place in between services. And I do this daily. So, I could pick up 20 Bibles for $20, on a daily basis. And I ended up on a podcast with a guy that called himself an apostle of Jesus Christ, which was hilarious in itself, because there hasn't been an apostle since the death of the original apostles of Christ. But yet this man had the audacity to say he was an apostle. And he really wasn't an apostle, because all he did was bitch, piss, and moan about things and try to force his way onto other people. But what was ironic about the fad is that anybody could start a fad, literally. And that's the moral of the story, is because I did this. Next thing you know, the church found out about it, or the minister found out about it, and then he started it up, which kind of took the fun out of toying with people, because I was looking forward to sending people down the wrong path at the time. But, namely because I just hate Christians. They've done nothing really good, except for they've done more harm than anything. So you might as well just eliminate them. Personally, by, say, for an example, undermining their work and what they've been doing. I'm the kind of guy that will sit there if I'm at the doctor's office and you got a Christian sitting there telling a homeless person, you know, trying to get him into church and trying to pray for him, and the person's like, I don't want nothing to do with this, but there's continuing on, and they tell their story about, their testimony about, how should I say this? Like, for an example, this one girl, she sat there and she says, and I quote, I just moved up here from Massachusetts. I'm trying to get my feet underneath me so I can get my kids back. I really don't know the area that well. Well, this moron and his friend wanted to bring this woman into church. That was their goal. Okay, was to get them into a church, their church, the Mansion Ministry. They wanted her to become a Christian. They wanted her to go into slavery. And I purposely spoke up and said, well, you don't need to go to church for that. All you need to do is go here, 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 and here. And if you don't know where this is, somebody will take you. Hell, I'll take you. I said, you know what? These places will help you. This place will help you get a place to live. This place will get you food stamps. This place will get you money coming in. This place will help you find a job. Okay? To sustain yourself. And I went in, saw my doctor, and came out. Next thing I know, I saw both of these guys sitting there trying to lay hands on her and trying to pray for her. So I purposely pulled out my business card from the Order of the Black Thorn, and I walked right in between them, looked her in the eye, kept a straight face, and said, if you want to be serious and get your life in order for your kids, give me a call. I will guide you personally to the locations of where you need to be to become an individual and to get your life back. And I just walked out. Left those two Christians sitting there with their dicks in their hands. So that's what I'm talking about when I say I purposely piss them off. Because I'm interrupting their cash flow. I'm interrupting their little enterprises. And I'm doing it with a song in my heart. Because I don't like Christians. I really don't. They've done nothing for me but caused more trouble than they're worth. So, to learn their tricks, to learn how they do things, you find out that you got not just one group, but multiple groups within each church that has their own thought forms of what the Bible means. The hierarchy, such as the minister, down to their little butlers, I guess you can call it, to their doormen, their little bodyguards, are more in it for the money. They're in the loop on what's going on politically. Whereas the flock themselves have different viewpoints of what is politically correct. You remember in a few of my videos, I've talked about the law of the land, where magic, baneful magic, is legal in one village, whereas in another village, it is illegal. Okay? So it does come down to the law of the land. However, when we're talking the mark of the beast compared to the witch's mark, Christians will do anything and make up any excuse to eliminate an enemy. And this is actually shown not only through mythology, but also historically through biblicology. Okay? When you read the Bible and you see how they eliminated their enemy, David wanted one of his lieutenants' wives. So he sent the guy into battle where he was murdered, just so he can bed the guy's wife. The Bible is full of rape, murder, torture, incest, and criminal activities that these Christians literally hold on to. And yet, Satanists are the bad guys. Anton Szandor LaVey clearly stated this within his essays on "Let yourself be known, and thy enemies will do the rest." Okay? So, starting a fad really is not that hard. You know, the sister that I'm referring to, in essence, could be possibly right. But if she actually paid attention over the last 5 years, 10 years, she would know that it predates Telia Curtis and Caitlin White of the Children of the Blacks, or the Children of the Serpent. So, I mean, it's not just this. Anybody could start a trend. So, I mean, the corruption goes back even further than that, because in the last 25 years, we've seen a rise of Christian witches. Jeremy Adam Capps actually wrote a Bible called the Christian and Satanic Bible, where he utilized the Bible as his explanation of satanic or Satanism. So you see, it's not just one thing, it's a whole clusterfuck of stupidity. Because if anybody actually took the time to read the Bible and to study it, they would see that in Exodus chapter 24, verse 18, it states, and I quote, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." But yet, if you predate Christianity, the earliest known Bible that scripture was originally, "Thou shalt not allow a murderer to suffer." Not a witch, but a murderer. There is as many Bibles as there is divisions of Christians. Okay? And this is all hypocrisy. It's all stupidity, because in Revelations 22, verses 18 and 19, it clearly says that if any man adds or takes away from this book, the same shall be done out of the book of life. Okay? Which is kind of ironic if you think about it, because all they're doing is rewriting the book to fit their own needs, generation to generation. Every time a new scroll has been dug up by archaeologists, Jehovah's Witnesses are rewriting their book. Okay? So, I mean, you really have to delve into the works yourself. And that's the moral of this story here, is do your own research. I just gave you several authors, several references, just on the witch's mark versus the devil's mark, or the mark of the devil, the mark of the beast. And what's interesting here is that the populace puts everything that bad that happens to them in their lives on the devil, on Satan. Satan did it. He's evil. He's the opposer. He's the destroyer. He's the this or that. Well, I hate to tell you this, but I concur with Anton Szandor LaVey on this one. The 9 satanic statements, number 9, Satan has been the best friend the church ever had, because it was he who kept it in business all these years. Okay? And when you think about this, was it Satan that did this, or was it your own stupidity? Okay? So, really delve into the works. You can't just sit there and follow a fad and say, you know what? This group I want to belong to. I really don't want to end up alone. I don't want to be shunned. I want to be a part of something. To be fair, there's nothing wrong with that. There really is not. But you do need to do your own homework, because if you don't, you might as well just remain a Christian with your head stuck in the proverbial sandbox called an altar. Because works and deeds, words and actions go hand in hand. Okay? Herbalism is another formation of a method of getting rid of one's enemy. It's not just the mark of the beast or the witch's mark, although herbalism was found on several of the accused. This is found in Remy's book of demonolatry, an ancient historical account of witchcraft, chapter 1, where he describes 3 powders: a black powder which kills, a amber type color that makes sick or ill, and a white powder that was known to heal. Okay, so again, items associated with witchcraft, things that they could use to rid themselves of opposing forces. But if you look at the name Satan, it does mean opposer. It does mean accuser. It does mean he who opposes in Hebrew. You got 2 definitions of his name. Hebrew, it means accuser. Islamic means opposer. So where'd the tempter come in to play? Oops, burst your bubble. But here's the other thing. Satan is pronounced Ha-Satan in Hebrew. El-Shaitan in Islamic. 2 different spellings, 2 different meanings to the name Satan. But yet, if you look up the term Satan, he is a member of the Grigori, the first order of angels, the most powerful, the watcher angels. Okay? The same unit of angels that Azazel, the scapegoat, was said to be a part of. He who made a deal with Shimyaza, a much older demon, who ironically made a deal with Yukon, an ancient demon, to take all the blame for it. Interesting how that works, isn't it? How not only does the marks play a part into witchcraft and demonolatry, but also into angelology. Today, if you watch the show Supernatural, for an example, the mark of the beast was the sigil of Lucifer, given to Lucifer himself as a key, a lock to keep God's sister out of this world. And it was a mark that could be transferred onto the worthy. Lucifer to Cain, Cain to Dean Winchester. Interesting, huh? But yet, if you watch the Prophecy movies starring, just basically the Prophecy movies dealt with a war in heaven. The first Bible literally talks about the war in heaven, the first war in heaven, and the second war of heaven. But what if I told you that the second war of heaven is still going on today? Which is why Christians are fighting and pushing their agendas so hard, trying to find themselves worthy to belong to something. The populace is no different. Why else would we need the First Amendment, the Freedom of Religion Act? Why is it nobody can get along? It is because people are stuck in the diversity, the adversities, the divisions and sects of who's right and wrong, black and white. Laws of the land. Nobody's rising above that. And history shows that the truest sorcerers out there or have ever been are those that kept secret. They kept to themselves. They stayed out of the sublines of society's views. And they performed their rituals to the best of their abilities. The Witch of Endor was primarily one of the most recorded. Her power was great. Multiple practitioners over the last 100 years has quoted from her and discussed her rituals, including myself. And I've even done videos on the world's most powerful warlocks or sorcerers, both from the light and the dark side, to ever have been around. The different levels of sorceries and the magics, and how they correlate with the beings that we summon, that we work with. But nobody is really delving into what these marks really are, because nobody really knows and they can't admit to it. It's just something to keep over the heads of the masses, to keep them in line. Plain and simple. You've got all these resources talking about the mark of the devil, the mark of the witch, or the witch's mark. Or the initiation process of becoming a witch or warlock, sorcerer or sorceress, bruja or brujo. But nobody really knows what that mark is. They thought they knew for over 500 years, over almost 1,000 years. If it wasn't for Churchill stepping in for an American citizen during World War II back in 1937, 1938 area, the Witchcraft Act would not have been dissolved. It would still be in play today. So who knows? But I thought I'd do this video and put that out there and let you all do the research yourself and see what you can come up with. So that's that. Do you have any questions, Aquarian Dragon, before I log off? I'll take that as a no. So if you have any questions, I hope this has been, feel free to post them on the thing. I do get the notifications. So I will make myself available to the public, and hope this has been enlightening. Hope it's been educational. And until next time, this dark sorcerer is out. Enjoy.